Hey guys, how's it going? Matt from Foul Ball Productions here. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you're doing well, because I'm doing phenomenally. Thank you so very much. It's the 24th episode of the MFer podcast, coming at you live with a guest, not by myself. No solo ranting today. I know you wished it was, but fortunately for me, I'm joined by Jed, Hollywood scholar. Can I say you're part of the Geeks and Gamers crew? Is that accurate?
Yep. I'm officially a member of the crew. So yeah, G&G member here.
Official Geeks and Gamers member, alum, employee, genuine article. How you doing today, Jed?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here. I look forward to diving into whatever we have to talk about. But yeah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome to be here. I like talking to you. You've been on the MFer a few times, the Cocktail Lounge, the Friday night live stream shit show that I do. And I thought I really enjoyed talking to you. I thought you had some interesting takes. I like how you're opinionated without being like disagreeable. That's something I struggle with. I tend to be
hard line.
Yeah, well, I tend to be opinionated and disagreeable, and it's really not a characteristic most people gravitate towards. But I respect the way you can, like the other night, how you were articulating that you like Christopher Nolan and hate Tarantino, which if you had
hate is a strong word.
Okay, don't prefer.
Okay.
If you had a more disagreeable personality, we'd be arguing. But the way you presented it to me, I was kind of like, oh, I mean, yeah, it's just his point of view. One thing we didn't get to, and I would like to start with this if it's okay with you. Right. You are a published author.
That's right. Yeah, I have the first two books in my 5-book fantasy series out, Odyssey of a Phoenix. So the first one's Down in Flames, and the second one is Apocalypse Then. But
how long are those books?
They're meaty. The first one's 650 pages. The other one's about 550, I believe.
Holy shit.
So, yeah, they got a little weight to them. I envision them like my goal. Obviously, this is a high aspiration. Don't know if I achieve it, but I was trying to be a continuation of the epics of Homer. And some of those can get a little bit longer. Like Homer is a big inspiration of mine. Of course, mine isn't poetry like Homer, but I think of it as a continuation of that story and that the way that he presented Greek mythology. Of course, it's in modern day, but yeah, Homer is a very big inspiration, and I was a big priority for me with making this was accuracy. I do not contradict, if at all possible, anything that happens in Homer, anything that Herodotus mentions. Like, I did a lot of studying on Greek texts to try to make this as honorable a continuation of Greek mythology as I was capable of.
Well, obviously, I'm familiar with the story of Homer, but for the people in the chat that might not be, could you maybe get into the story of Homer? For those of us, obviously, I know the story of Homer clearly, but if you wouldn't mind, that's the Odyssey, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Homer was one of the first literary geniuses of the ancient world. He was a Greek historian who kind of brought together a bunch of oral traditions and wrote them down. He was blind, interestingly enough, but his tales that he helped translate into text versus oral were the stories of the Trojan War, specifically with Achilles in the Iliad. I love that one, but I hate that it ends after 4 years of the journey. We don't get the full 10 years of the Trojan War, just the first 4. And then his second one was the Odyssey, which focuses on Odysseus' journey home from the Trojan War. And funnily enough, most people don't know this. This is a deep cut for anyone in the audience. There was actually a third Homer book that was lost in history, but we have descriptions of it and basically what it's about, and that one was called the Telenogeny. It was the tale of Telemachus, the son of Odysseus, as he journeyed back to the island of Circe. So,
was that lost when that library burned down?
It's possible. We don't know exactly when. We just have random references to it existing, but we don't have it right now. So it very well may have lost during the burning of the Library of Alexandria. But from what we know of the Telenogeny, I try to keep consistent with what little we know about the Telenogeny. I also consider that canon.
Well, I've got a fun fact for you. I know that you obviously have dabbled in your creative works as far as retelling the story of Homer and the Odyssey. I also have. For a high school project, I made a stop-motion Lego movie of the burning of Troy.
That's awesome. I would
It
love
was
to see that.
it was actually sick. I think it's lost to time, much like Homer's third work. But I think I actually even snuck in like a rape. Because they're burning and pillaging. There must have been a rape, right? So I just
Obviously.
I had a Lego like bend over like another Lego. I
That's
snuck that in.
That's 100% something I would do too if I were doing that.
Well, me and my friend growing up, we used to do those for fun. We used to just make stop motion Lego movies. It was awesome. It was so much fun. And then for whatever reason, we were studying that in high school, and I was like, all right, that's gonna be my my visual aid. And I think I got an A but I think that was my visual aid saved it because my presentation was absolutely terrible.
I did the same thing. I made a short film on the Gettysburg Address, and that saved my whole project because I didn't put any effort into the rest of it.
It was all just the visual aid part.
Yep, exactly.
Stop motion does rule, indeed, Sentient Dildo.
It does.
Indeed.
I used to dabble. Haven't in a long time, but I did used to dabble.
It was so much fun, dude. Like, it was just me and my friend would do that for hours, and it was like an absolute blast to just make. And we'd show them to our family, and we'd get like, you know, genuine compliments. I remember getting like critiques. They're like, "This one seems a little jerky than the last one." You know, they were giving me like, "We don't appreciate this one." So it's like, oh, I mean, I'm 11, but okay. So you said the book takes place in modern day.
Yes.
Is there like an Afghanistan parallel or something? Like, how does what's the, because it's a war, right? Like, that's Achilles and all that stuff is.
No. So what I mean is it's a continuation, as in it's a sequel. So
It's not an adaptation.
it's not an adaptation. No, it's not an adaptation. So like the events in Homer are referenced heavily and they're talked about a lot, but it's still a modern day story with modern day characters that are existing in post Grecian world.
Are they like related to the people are they like, you know, the descendants of Achilles like 2,000 years later or whatever?
There's always the possibility. There are some things that I have planned for the future that might relate to that, but that would be a spoiler for some of the later novels that I haven't written yet. But
okay.
No, I just mean more than anything else, it was the spirit of Homer, and Homer was my canon, basically. That's how I operated with it as. So it's modern story, modern characters. And the big thing that was the first hurdle for me is I wanted a logical reason for why the Greek gods weren't as prevalent in society today as influential as they were back in the day. And so figuring out a world in which that made any sense was the building block off of all of it. Because of course, Greek mythology, it's not a religion anymore as widespread. There is absolutely a religious aspect of it that still exists today. And I studied those people, met with those people. And
Really?
And some of my characters in the story practice modern day Greek religion.
Cool.
And I tried to keep it as accurate in that sense as possible. In everything that I did, accuracy was the most important thing. But I had to explain why, you know, they weren't the champions of intellect now like they were in the ancient world. So that's the bedrock on what the story's built on.
What is your explanation for why the Greek gods have not been hanging out with us?
So it's kind of interesting. A parallel that I did is right about the fall of Greece, the fall of paganism, or the fall of polytheism, paralleled chronologically, very similar to the rise of Christianity. So I have a parallel where it's belief that makes things happen. Humanity's belief fuels the gods' abilities. And so as belief in Christianity grew, the gods faded, and Kronos took advantage of that opportunity and rose to power. He defeated the gods, and the gods went into hiding as humans. They tore out their divinity, is what I call it, their godly spirit, and basically became mortal. So all the gods are living as everyday people. And so the main character's journey in the first book, just the first one, is
much like the 90s song, What If God Was One of Us?
Much like it, yeah.
You made that literal.
What if God was one of us? I mean, I had fun trying to figure out what each god would look like in the modern day. Like I have Zeus as a stockbroker in New York City, like just coming up with explanations for why everything's the way it is, where they hid their godly spirits, reuniting them. All that was it was a fun exercise. And this one, for those who know Greek mythology, will make a lot of sense, and you'll laugh at. I have Apollo as a gay porn star in Florida.
I don't know my Greek mythology well enough to understand that punchline. I'm sure they're cackling out there, but why is Apollo a Greek porn star or in Florida?
Oh, he was a horny motherfucker. That was his whole
Okay.
deal. Him and Dionysus really, they just anything that could be bent over was bent over. That was kind of the way they operated. So porn star just made sense to me.
That's
And
pretty
Greek,
funny.
there's a stereotype of, ancient Greece being very gay, which is an
Yeah.
accurate one to a certain extent. So I do incorporate that in as logical way if I can. Like I use my work as an inverse to modern Hollywood because yes, diversity and inclusion, it's great, whatever, as long as it makes sense. And the same applies to race as it does with sexual orientation. And in Greek, with Greek people, they were this way at a much higher percentage than modern day. So I incorporated it in a way that felt natural and consistent with the ancient tales because there are Greek myths in and of themselves of the gods having same-sex relationships. Like Artemis, she was, fucking around with her Artemis's hunters. There's no getting around that.
Nice. I like when chicks do it, not when guys do it. That's gay. But when chicks do it, yeah. You bring up an interesting point though about the diversity inclusion being like well represented, like genuinely represented. I actually truly empathize with that in a real way. It's jammed down our throat. And I really think the reason is not because the actual diversity, it's the messaging behind it that people have a problem with. Because I was watching Netflix's Beef. I just finished it the other day. Yeah. I really want to talk to someone else who watched that because I finished watching it and I was like, huh. Like, I really liked it. The last two episodes got kind of wacky. Still worth your time. It's a very good show. But the thing is, it focuses heavily on this Korean family, and I think the other woman is maybe Japanese, but almost everyone in the show is Asian. Like, I'd say 90 to 95% of every single actor in the show is Asian. But they don't call attention to it. Yeah. And therefore, you're just watching these people, and it's a really interesting, like, gateway into a slightly different culture. I mean, it's still... They're still Americans, but like there's a Korean aspect to like the main character and like his brother, and his like parents who are actually in Korea because of financial hardships and so on and so forth. But when it's done right, it's actually almost like a tourism pass to a different culture or a different way of living. And I think it's a beautiful way to explore the world and to genuinely be inclusive, like truly what that actually means. They don't mean it that way in modern Hollywood. They mean, a whole other ball of shit. But I do think it's pretty fascinating. What do you think about that?
No, you're absolutely correct. And I enjoy a lot of Asian entertainment as well, specifically Korean dramas. Korean dramas are great. Like there's one on Netflix. It's actually a Korean sci-fi show called The Silent Sea about discovering water on the moon. It's phenomenal. I love it. And
that sounds familiar to me.
It's just what we've always done. Even in the ancient world, it was introducing
yourself. That's right. Yes, I started watching that. Yes, I remember.
I love that show. And Gong Yao, the guy he's in it, he did Train to Busan. That was a big movie from a couple years ago.
Yes, I remember that movie.
He's phenomenal. I've watched a lot of the stuff with him in it. And there's a lot of other great stuff from Asia, and that's how you do diversity right. It should be a consideration, but the way I describe it on my channel is it's misaligned priorities in the way that Hollywood does it right now. It can be a priority, but it can't come above world building. It can't come above plot. It can't come above just making logical sense. It has to be secondary to story at the end of the day, as long as it fits in with the universe.
Oh, got some activity on the phone there.
I have it muted. I'm looking at it right now. It says it's muted, so I'm just shutting it down.
Oh, good.
But there are logical ways to do things, and that's what Hollywood used to be capable of, because they're acting as if Hollywood was never diverse, that there was never any black people who existed in movies before 2016. Or if you take Jennifer Lawrence's word for it, there's never been a female action star before her, even though we have evidence of one way back in, I think, the 1920s, like well over 100 years.
It's such a ridiculous assertion. It's almost like profane to prove her wrong. You're like, all right, shut up, idiot.
Exactly. Yeah. And if nothing else, one of the most popular ones is Ridley from the Alien movies, and that was in the 70s. That was well before Jennifer Lawrence's era, but these modern woke tards, they pretend that they're the first ever to do things, first ever to do this, and they like that achievement. That's the thing, is that's where the priorities, I believe, come in wrong, because every single time they do something, they're like, we're the first to do this. But that discredits a lot of incredible things that came before, like Black Panther's like, we're the first black superhero movie ever. No, Blade takes that title, and Blade, you can't discredit the impact that Blade had upon the world, because it saved Marvel from bankruptcy. There is no MCU without Blade, and so you're desecrating a true revolutionary film, a truly impactful film, for a modern day achievement award, basically. And I think that's incredibly disrespectful.
It is, of course, but what they mean is we're the first to do it with the message.
Of course.
That's what it's all about. It's all about the agenda, the message, the whatever the hell they're trying to push, anti-West, anti-white, anti-all that shit. That's what they mean when they say the first. We've pioneered, blah, 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 blah. Now we're doing it when the communists are in charge of the narrative is what they really mean. And it's just like, all right, well, go fuck yourself. And it's the thing, it always falls flat. I watched a really interesting video by Razor Fist the other day, and he was saying how get woke, go broke is a misnomer. And that's something I've kind of not always thought, but I'm always just like,
it's too emphatic.
Also, I don't think it's accurate. I just don't think it works. I mean, sometimes it works, but I don't think it's like a rule. And I think Sentient Dodo was the one that said it was like copium, or it was a cope or something like that. And I was like, yeah, I kind of agree. What Razor Fist's assertion was, it was go broke, get woke. That getting woke was a way of like companies trying to save themselves from the brink of collapse, which I thought was a really interesting idea. And he made the point for DC Comics, how DC Comics had basically collapsed, and that was them just basically, it was a Hail Mary to save the company. Yep. And same thing with Warner Brothers, which I was like, oh, these are okay. Razor Fist always blows my mind, where I'm like, I don't even have an opinion on what you just said. Like, I'm just kind of like, oh, I didn't know that.
That could definitely help fill in some of the gaps that Go Woke, Go Broke creates, but I don't think it's not either an emphatic rule, just like Go Woke, Go Broke isn't an emphatic rule. Like, Marvel was not anywhere near broke when they started going woke. So it's just fills in the gaps a little bit. It's an alternative that explains several scenarios, but I don't think it's across the board that either.
That's a good point too. Yeah, because it's, I think we were talking about it the other night, but like I was letting you know, I used to live in LA. I was an actor for a long time, so I was like entertainment industry adjacent. I was never really in it, but I was very close to it. And it is such a powerful collective, and people are always so desperate and scrambling to not say the wrong thing and to be accepted by the group and so on and so forth. But I think like it is such, and they're so good at extricating people who are not part of the thing. Like, they know you are not part of the thing so quick, even when you don't agree, not even actively disagreeing. If you don't immediately agree, they clock it. I remember that happening to me. So there's so much social pressure to push the narrative. It's almost kind of like inevitable. It's like also like, do you not want to be here, or are you gonna play ball? Like, I think that's kind of, it's like the only thing that can happen. They don't really it's like, you see the Mario movie right now, right? On track to break $1 billion. Fans love it. Like, we were talking with Steph the other night, and she's seen it 5 times. Like, my roommate absolutely adored it. Like, everyone I've talked to who's seen it loves it, right? But 50% critic score. Why is that? Probably because it's not pushing a narrative.
That's exactly what it is. And these people, they seem to hate fun. I know that's kind of simplistic, but at the end of the day, it seems like anything good they despise, and the vice versa is also true. But yeah, I think 100% the explanation is it wasn't as progressive as it could be. Like, a lot of people are talking about, Peach didn't save the day at the end. Oh my God, this is terrible. I wish Peach had more agency. Whereas the people who like the movie, they're like, Peach was fine. Maybe a little bit less agency. It's kind of funny how that works. But it's just a fun movie. I really enjoyed it as well. I think it's slightly better written than a lot of people are giving it credit for, but it's still not a paragon of quality. Yeah, and Chris Pratt is definitely a contributing factor into that.
Good point. I didn't even think of that.
I'd say that would probably be a lot of it. Like, more than not, I say Chris Pratt would probably be the biggest hatred of the film from critics, because they're 100% on the Twitter woke-tard bandwagon of hating Chris Pratt because he breathes. And so that was a big thing
Well,
in
he
a lot of the
doesn't.
reviews
He
as well.
doesn't capitulate the narrative. It's the same thing with reason why they got rid of Gina Carano. She wouldn't capitulate with the narrative. They had a suspicion she was conservative. As far as I know it, I don't think she was outwardly political until they kicked her out.
Well, even now she hasn't taken a political stand party-wise. Like, she's still not
right, but
she's officially.
You could
she's more vocal. Yeah, she's more vocal.
You can kind of conclude that she's most likely. I mean, she spends a lot of time on Not that I care. I'm not judging her for it. I'm just saying, like, it seems to me fairly evident. She's from Texas, I think. You know what I mean? Like, I imagine, which it shouldn't fucking matter, but for them it matters. Absolutely because not. It's like, you know, if you're not with us, you're against us. Like, they draw a very hard line in the sand. But I think you're right when you say they don't like fun. I think there's a reason for that, because it's like everything is about the agenda. It's like you do, and I don't mean this like even nefariously. I think they believe like it should all be revolutionary. Even the people who aren't necessarily evil, because I knew a lot of these people. They're not bad people. They like, I remember like when Trump got elected, there was a girl who had like a literal panic attack because she thought that sexual assaults were going to just become the norm, which is like, wow, that's insane. You're crazy. Turn off the fucking news, you nut job.
Yeah.
But also, that's the narrative they're pushing. Like, that's what they were trying to convince people of. And I think like that's a lot of these people who do mean well. They want to be good. They want to be, then this is how you're a virtuous person. This is how you're a good person. I think they are like programmed to believe if every piece of media, if every single thing you do isn't trying to, you know, upend the patriarchy or stop climate change or, you know, right the wrongs of the past and injustice, and like, then it's not, you know, it's not good. It's like it all needs to serve that, you know, righting the wrongs of the past movement or whatever the hell they think. Yeah. So I think it's like, yeah, the people in that system, like if you're not doing that, they're like, what are you just entertaining people? You're just having fun? You can't have fun. The planet's ending. Trump might get reelected. Don't you understand the stakes? I think that's really how they look at it.
I wholeheartedly agree. A lot of the woke people aren't bad people. They're just, you know, confused to a certain extent. And that you brought up a really good point of the whole, it seems to be the virtuous thing to do. And a lot of people who aren't technically woke but go along with it specifically because of that, because they're afraid to be called bad people. And that's the issue with the wokeness in Hollywood, is it infantilizes you to believe that you're a morally good person for supporting representation and diversity in a film. It's like, oh, it's great. There's more black people. And a lot of people are afraid to have their accurate opinions on things. I know a ton of people who, back when, for example, The Last Jedi came out, were afraid to say they didn't like the movie because they were afraid to get called sexist, even though Force Awakens came out earlier, and a lot of people genuinely like that. Not like that's evidence to the contrary or whatnot, but there's tons of examples of that. Anytime that there's diversity, inclusion, anytime that there's a woke messaging, it comes in parallel with your moral for liking this. You're a good person. If you like it, if you don't like it, you're a bad person. With that narrative around it, a lot of people who either don't care or aren't as invested or aren't as willing to speak up as people like us in our sphere are, they're just going to go along with it and say, yes, it was a great show or a great movie, just to keep up that pretense of moral purity. And
that's part of it.
The most damaging part of wokeness is it tricks you into thinking that you're a good person.
Well, the other thing is there's consequences for disagreeing. I face those consequences often. Remember, I told you at the beginning, I can be a disagreeable person. It's just a character flaw that I have. And I don't have a problem disagreeing with people. And I don't have a problem arguing with people. I don't have a problem calling people on what I think is bullshit. But it's like, I would get into these discussions with people where it's just like, if you don't agree, like I remember I had a Facebook back and forth with an acting coach about The Last Jedi, and I was like, I'm not watching. I already knew the writing was on the wall for me with Force Awakens. I knew it was horseshit. I saw it in the theater. I sat through that garbage. I hated it. Everyone was like, yay, it was so great. And I was just like, oh my God, like, I hate you all. But I was not going to go see The Last Jedi. I just knew I wasn't going to go see it because this is shit. And I remember I had a disagreement with like an acting coach on that, and she's just like, it really follows the hero's journey, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, all right, I'm not, Mark Hamill says it doesn't represent the Jedi or thing. I'm not going to see. She's like, Matt, like she was like pissed, like that I even had the concept of disagreeing in like without having seen it. I wasn't even shitting on it. I was just like, I don't need to. I don't want to, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, the thing is, like you say, like people, there is that, moral incentive to go along with the woke, but there's also genuine consequences if you don't. You will be, depending on your circle or your community, you will be extricated, you will be gossiped about, you will, lectured, and, women won't sleep with you. I think, like, I'm not exaggerating. Those are all real, genuine, real world consequences of not going along if you're in a world that has like a woke cult as kind of the center of it. And it's a real thing. So
it's already affecting the military as well. I just got out of the Air Force, and when I was in there, it was very evident. Even when Trump was president, you can't say that you like him. But when Biden was president, it was very evident you can't say you dislike him. And so it was just so politically divisive. And that's the thing that I am always going to advocate for on my with my platform and with entertainment is I don't want political division at all. We can have our mature debates like you were talking about and do what humans have been doing since the beginning of time and be mature adults and have disagreements, but it shouldn't be the mainstay thing that everybody has to constantly be absorbed in. In entertainment, there should be, occasionally you can have a left-leaning movie as long as it's okay to occasionally have a right-leaning movie. And the norm be non-political, just telling good stories. And that's where my biggest problem in all this wokeness begins and ends, is storytelling is suffering from it. I'm a big fan of the classics when it comes to novels. I've read so much Dickens, Homer. I love everything old because storytelling was so strong. And for a long time, Hollywood was able to maintain that quality of storytelling. There's some incredible films from the last century that will be remembered forever as long as humanity is capable of that technology. And as long as something really bad doesn't happen, they're going to be remembered. But with all this wokeness, the storytelling, like they said in the chat, has suffered to such a degree that it's non-existent. You're hiring people based on their look, based on their diversity quotient portions, and not based on their talent. And that destroys entertainment, and that in turn damages the culture. Because as Greek mythology is the one that I always use an example of. Mythology was their modern or their entertainment of the day. That was how they processed the world. Those were their stories, and their mythology is incredibly influential in our society today. It's in even our ad campaigns, our marketing, and our morality, and our political systems. It is so influential. But if at the time that the mythology was being created, somebody came in and is like, you know what, this mythology, it's not 100%, it's not very nice to people who aren't in this story. Or Zeus, he sleeps with too many women non-consensually, he's a bad man, we have to stop all these stories. Then we lose all that in the modern day. Entertainment, yes, it's secondary to a lot of other things in our culture, but in our society, but culture shapes society. So I think it's important to have an escapism aspect of it too. There needs to be an escapism aspect, but there needs to be an intellectual aspect of it that enriches us as people. And Hollywood used to get that. There were movies that inspired us to be better. The
thing is, like, the artists used to be like the punks, right? They used to be the ones challenging the status quo. And now, I'm not saying that's gone. That's still, I still advocate for modern stand-up comedy because of how much good comedy there is, and how much a lot of them genuinely contrast the norms, which I respect. That's what you're supposed to do when you're an artist. You're supposed to challenge the status quo, whatever that status quo is, whether it's an ultra-left thing that we have or an ultra-right thing like we used to have. You're supposed to challenge it. You're supposed to go after it. This is, I think, at least the past few years, probably not as much right now, but at least, from 2016 on, like, was an unprecedented time when the entertainment and the artists became the system. Like and there was no dissenting voices, or if they were so few and far between. Like, they barely existed. It was Raging for the Machine, like that whole thing. Like, even when I listen to Rage Against the Machine now, and I love their like music, but I really like cringe at the lyrics and everything. But even when they were doing it, like, that still wasn't that popular. They was still punk rock to a degree, where it was aggressive towards like whatever the norms were, the status quo or the media. It was like, it was punk. It had a punk spirit. Now you're like, oh, it's just like critical theory from college. It's nothing that punk at all. But it's still like, at the time when you're saying it against the norm, and it was so weird, I think, for everybody to like, I don't know. It was basically like you pulled the curtain back and you realize that like most of these people in Hollywood, it's like, oh, you're not even kind of independent, are you? Like you're a puppet. They pull your strings and you just go along with it. And I think this was like the first time. I don't know. For me, it felt very unprecedented. Maybe it was just I caught up to what was going on. I don't know. But it was. I thought it was a really wild. You're just like, oh, like you guys are like, SNL used to critique like everyone in politics. There wasn't, you didn't pick a side. Like the whole, they lampooned the shit out of Clinton, all this stuff. Like you're supposed to do that. Like that's, you're the minstrel. You're the, what's it called? The jester, the court jester. You're supposed to be the one who pokes fun at it. But now we had like a raging for the machine. We have this internal thing where it's like, you guys aren't that at all. You're 100% on the inside and you're just doing what the machine wants you to do. It's like, whoa. Kind of mind-blowing. Like, wait a minute. You guys are supposed to be the ones poking fun at all this shit. Like, and I think that was what led to the rise of the YouTuber culture that we have now. The like the independent comedy scene that we have now. I think it was an absolute direct result of, wow, I guess the voices who are supposed to kind of, critique or shake things up or poke the bear or say the emperor's got no clothes are gone. And I think I kind of like realized it without realizing it, because I remember this a few years ago where you were talking about like the old books and old stuff. I just realized I just had like just this need to watch the movies that I felt comforted by, that I already knew I liked, like this kind of old school, my old taste. I just needed to be comforted. I need like a security blanket, because it's like, I think when you feel like they're not making things for you or actively attacking you and criticizing you in the content, you feel this need to like, be reminded of the things that you like. It's a big deal. It's a huge part. Like you say, the escapism, like that's a big part of living, is escaping that type of stuff.
And to be clear, I get criticized for saying escapism is important a lot, because people assume, oh, so you only like Fast and Furious movies, you only like Transformers. No, escapism doesn't mean turn your brain off action. Escapism means escaping your reality. That can be on 100% an intellectual basis as well as a mindless basis. Like Inception is a great example of it. It's a hard movie to understand, but it is 100% escapism. There's not anything that reminds me of my everyday life in the movie Inception. Not a single thing. And I love it. It's great escapism. It makes me think. So escapism isn't mindless fun. I always have to clarify that, because there's always going to be someone who says, oh, that's what you like. No, there's a lot more to it than that. Even social commentary stuff from back in the day, like classic Star Trek, which had a lot of social commentary, which I love because it got it right in that it didn't demonize any side in a lot of arguments. That's what classic Doctor Who, classic Star Trek did. It merely asked questions and then the audience answered them for themselves. They just presented the evidence, you figure it out, and try to tell a good story at the same time. It was incredibly escapist to think about being a captain on an Enterprise exploring distant planets. But there were things that you could reapply into your own life after you were done being in escapism. Escapism is a lost art, and it's so much more impactful and meaningful than people believe. It is not just Transformers. Everyone I talk to, that's their first example of an escapist movie. No, anything well written that doesn't remind you of your current life, it just makes you think about something else for a few minutes, a few hours. That is escapism.
I think that's why video games are so popular right now, because there's a singular focus to a video game. You are just focused on your tasks and side quests and all that shit, and it takes you to another world, and you're not living in your own reality for a little while. I think that's the huge rise. But to your point, I will give a terrific example that is straight up, essentially socialist propaganda. Is a movie, I think Robert Redford produced it, but it's called The Motorcycle Diaries. Have you ever seen it?
No, I haven't.
It stars Gael Garcia Bernal, and it takes place in the 50s in South America, and it's about what the hell is that guy's name? Che Guevara. When before he was a revolutionary, when he was just a medical student, him and his friend, this pharmacist, decide to take a motorcycle trip around the entirety, or at least like the outline of South America, see all these countries, see their continent, when they're just like college kids, right? And then that eventually inspires him to become, the socialist revolutionary that we all know of. But it's an absolutely beautiful movie. It's funny. It's a road trip. It's like a buddy comedy. And it's 100% escapism. Even though at the end of the day, the message is still pretty empathetic to a pretty bad guy. It's 100% escapism, because even then, like, it was storytelling that put you somewhere. Mm-hmm. Right? It was a lens into a different time, a different culture, a different perspective. And if they really want to be effective, that's how you do it.
Oh, absolutely. It's not hard. There's a reason people have been doing it since the advent of, written text or oral tradition. It's not complicated, but Hollywood these days acts like it's the most hard thing to accomplish. And it's just sad to see so many unintelligent people running Hollywood. Sometimes I have to wonder, are they being malicious or are they just that stupid? It's hard to tell sometimes.
Well, I think it's both. I think it's it's not even necessarily they're stupid. It's that they don't give a shit. They just want to do what lets them be there. Mm-hmm. That was probably the most deflating thing about my time in Hollywood, was the amount of people who didn't really have a passion for it, that worked in the industry, that were part of the industry. It was just the cool club. It was the cool job to have. And it was like, wait, so you guys don't care? Like, the amount of men, alleged men, that I met in Hollywood who had not seen the fucking Godfather blew my mind.
Really?
I would quote like Schwarzenegger movies and they'd look at me with a blank stare. I'm like, you've never seen Total Recall? Like, what? What are you doing? Like, they liked Friends and shit. It was the cool kids club. It was the popular, cool job to have. They didn't give a shit. They didn't get passionate about it. They wouldn't have like impassioned opinions. It was just the cool thing to do. It was so disappointing. So I think when you're dealing with people like that, who just want to be popular, just want to be liked, just want to be in the cool thing, they, they'll do whatever it takes to do it. And if that means pushing this leftist agenda, whatever, they'll do it. They don't care. Like, they don't have passions. They barely have personalities.
And passion is a root of a lot of the issue as well. Even when you take it on an individual franchise level, let alone a massive widespread Hollywood level, when someone comes into a beloved franchise with a lot of passion and proves that, fans get excited. Or at least when you have passion to try. Doctor Who is always a great example that I use, because when David Tennant took over the role, everyone knew that he loved Doctor Who. It was one of his favorite things in the world. He grew up with it. He was a massive, massive fan. So upon his announcement, people were interested. People were excited. Of course, you need to still be good. You still need to be competent in what you're doing and be prove to the fans that you should be there. But that gets that initial interest, and that's something a lot of places are lacking right now. J.J. Abrams is not a fan of Star Wars. He might say, I wore a Star Wars t-shirt once. That doesn't make you a Star Wars fan. So if we'd gotten someone in there who, studied George Lucas in other projects, he's like, I take inspiration from George Lucas to make this movie, and I really hope it's a love letter to George Lucas. Someone like that coming in would have made people a lot more interested in The Rise of Skywalker, for example, or something like that, because passion, you have a better chance of being good and honoring the past if there's passion. And the same applies to Hollywood as a whole. If you've got new filmmakers coming in, just like you're saying, new actors coming in who know The Godfather, who love classic stuff and want to continue in the spirit of that, telling great stories, how people like Scorsese, Spielberg, and others did, then we have a better chance of great stories coming back to the forefront of the industry. And until that changes, we're just going to have people who are like, I'm here because it's cool, just like you said. And so Hollywood is in trouble as long as that mentality prevails.
It's very evident who's a fan and who isn't. Like, you see someone like Ryan Reynolds going to war to make Deadpool the way it needed to be made. right? Changing the game by making a successful R-rated action movie or comic book movie. You know what I mean? Like, and he clearly loved the character, loved the source material. He's obviously a passionate guy. You see someone like Henry Cavill, right, in The Witcher. He's such a passionate fan, they've kicked him out, essentially. Right? He so wants to honor the canon and the legacy that's a problem for them, you know? Or you look at a guy who I like, God, I can't think of his name right now, but he's the showrunner of probably my favorite show ever, The Expanse. The guy was obviously a fan of the books, obviously a fan of like physics and good storytelling, and really gave a shit about making it correctly. Like, it's so evident who's a fan and who isn't. You see how many people like I know it's like an obvious example, but you take something like She-Hulk, right? It's like clearly that writer didn't want to make a She-Hulk show. She wanted to make this like badass lawyer show or like whatever, you know what I mean? But like had to do it within the framework because that's what they make. And so she's like resentful of the source material that she has to adapt or work with. You know, it's like, it's so obvious you're not a fan of this. Like, there's you see that. Like, it's like these stories, like these Hollywood people, they make these movies and they're dog shit. And it's like, you don't even need to write the fucking story. The story already exists. There's countless comic books with good stories. Just plagiarize it. Steal it. Because it's the source material, you jackass. Like, you don't even need...
They're too dumb to steal. That's how dumb these people are.
Oh, I guess fucking, was it? Picasso was right. Great artists steal, and they can't even do that.
Yep. So, I mean, what am I doing to Homer?
Yeah, but that's like, I think it's true. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Nothing, what says that there's nothing unique under the sun or whatever. Like, I wrote a pilot, a television pilot, science fiction that I'm still pretty proud of. But I realized in like certain things, like, that's a scene from The Matrix. Like, I realized that. I was like, I stole that. Like, it was subconscious. It wasn't active. Yeah. But then once I realized it, fuck it. Lean into it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, now that you know you're stealing it, like, adapt it, make it your own. And that's where you got the inspiration from. I mean, why even make something if you weren't inspired by something that already existed? Like, who the hell are you? You know what I mean?
It's a lot of pride.
There's a lot of pride. Office Girl sent me a super sticker. Thank you so much for $1.64 Canadian. And it's sandwiches because she makes us sandwiches. Thank you so much, Office Girl. I appreciate you. So
yeah, we're using stealing as hyperbole, Office Girl. Obviously, it's not legally stealing.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, if you have honor, stealing isn't stealing. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's respect. It's homage. You're acknowledging what came before you. I mean, I know you're not a big Tarantino fan, but you could argue his entire career is plagiarized. Oh. You know, everything he's ever done.
Of homages.
It's all remixed.
Loves the past.
100%. But he's taken it so much and skewed it so much and made it his own so much that it's not even recognizable to the thing that he took it from. Like, you can be like, oh, that's clearly influenced from, whatever, Fellini or something. But it's like he takes it and makes it his own so much that it's like, if he wants to tell a genuine story, he wants to contribute to the cinema. Like, if you're doing it with honor, it's not really theft. It's respect.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, you can take it in another direction without honor. It becomes an issue. For example, with Rings of Power and Witcher Blood Origin, specifically Witcher Blood Origin more so than Rings of Power. When we were watching it together, a few friends of mine, other channel content creators, we were watching it together, and at a certain point, we started counting the ripoffs. And at that point, it was just lazy ripoffs to not have to do any work. And there was obviously no honor. There was not homage. It's just, we got to do something here. Oh, there's that thing I saw. Maybe we do that. And it was just so much. We had a list of at least 50 scenes. We're not talking about references. We're talking about 50 scenes we found that were stolen and were such inferior versions of the original that show, I would argue Witcher Blood Origin was worse than Rings of Power. Most people disagree. I'm much more of a Witcher guy myself than a Lord of the Rings guy, but there is that inverse, just like you're saying. Honor makes a big impact about how it's presented and how people receive it as well.
It's like the way Jaws is a monster movie, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like it recreates the whole concept. It spins it on its head, creates a new interpretation of that genre. But then you have a movie like Orca that's clearly just ripping off Jaws. You know what I mean? It's like you just took the idea, changed the animal, and then that's about as much work as you did.
Yep.
Like that's a ripoff. It's a completely different thing. It's like you can't say Jaws is ripping off monster movies. It's like no, it reinterprets it. It takes it into a new realm. It imagines it in a different way. Orca steals. That's the difference.
It's a good example. Yep. It's perfect.
So what's your background, like this whole literature thing that you have? Like, I mean, I don't know many people who are like impassioned about the Odyssey. Like, that's pretty interesting.
The Odyssey, yeah, that you picked the right one too. The Odyssey is the one that I care the most about when it comes to classic literature. But background wise, I have a weird history. I grew up in a small town in Idaho. I was homeschooled. It was a town of 400 people, so it wasn't like there were kids my own age to hang out with. But the ones that were there, I wasn't allowed to hang out with. So the only escapism that I had was reading classic literature from my local library. I just ate it up. The first time I remember reading the Odyssey, I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I was hooked. And so I was reading Dickens at that age, Homer at that age, and I mean, even Lord of the Rings later on once I got a little bit older. And that was what shaped my young life, is classic literature and storytelling. And so when I got a little bit older, I started writing myself. I actually started in writing film scripts. That's what I started working on. And my first book actually was a season of television. It was the 22-episode season of television at first. Shit. And then when I couldn't sell that, I was like, I haven't tried a book before. So I changed the season into a book. And that's how the first one started.
How old are you, Jed?
I'm 23.
23. Holy shit. Published author by 23.
Mm-hmm.
Way to go, bud. That's great.
Well, the first one came out in 2020, so it's been a couple of years.
Wow.
There was a point where the first two came out 6 months apart, and I hadn't even started the second one when the first one came out, and it's been 3 years, and I haven't read the third one. Yeah,
you're just like George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, I've been busy.
You know what? Live up to the greats. You know,
live up to the greats. I aspire to be as procrastinated as George R.R. Martin. That's my goal. It was all on purpose, as long as it's intentional.
Absolutely. You know, you're just modeling your life. I was actually I'm listening to this book right now called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Are you familiar with it?
I am familiar.
Pretty good book. I like it a lot. I could do without some of his sense of humor, but like for the most part, he doesn't give a fuck. But for the most part, it's pretty good. But he talked about Bukowski, who I've never read. But it was interesting how he was just a kind of a lousy, drunk, good for nothing jackass for like till he was like 50 or something like that. And then became a published author after that. Like that's when he began his contribution to literature at that late age in life. And I was just like, wow, that's pretty fucking fascinating.
There's a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
It's actually a pretty common story amongst the greats.
Stephen Pressfield. Do you know him?
I haven't read his work, but I'm familiar.
He's got that great book, The War of Art, which is essentially, you know, you'd actually probably really appreciate Pressfield because he really respects the classics. He wrote a book about, what the hell? I can't remember because I'm not smart, but it's it's about it was like this old, was the Gates of, is that the Gates of Fire or Tides of War? He basically writes about these sort of classic like Greek battles. They're essentially historical fiction, but he writes them like from like a novel. Like he writes them as novels, and they're really fucking terrific. But he wrote The War of Art, which is like my favorite book, and he basically writes about. He's a very good storyteller. So even when he's talking about the artistic practice, he's telling a story. And he tells the story of essentially of this great villain known as resistance. And resistance takes many forms. It could be a drug addiction. It could just be procrastination. It could be sex. It could just be like, I'm not good enough, whatever. It takes a form in many different ways. And it's essentially this force, this evil force that exists in the universe that essentially stops an individual from progressing, whether that means to create art or to exercise more or meditate or whatever, any way you improve this, you're always going to encounter this mystical force known as resistance. And it's a brilliant insight into the challenges. Essentially, it's about, a war of art. It's essentially about creating art, but you can apply it to so many different things. And it's essentially just this great insight into the process of creating things or even improving yourself. And because he's so brilliant, he writes it like almost like a story, so that you understand it like in these sort of terms of villains and heroes. And it's like, fuck, man, it's very insightful. I highly recommend reading that book. It's short too. It's not a big commitment. It's a very very easy book to check out. But I highly recommend checking out Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art.
Sounds right up my alley. I love highbrow stuff like that where it's classic hero's journey in interesting ways. That definitely sounds perfect for me. And other stories like that, just about art in general, I have no artistic talent. Like, I could not draw a stick figure to save my life. Like, I'm pathetic artist when it comes to visual representation, but I love hearing about, just like you said, the way it's presented, the mentality behind it. Victor Van Gogh is one of my favorite Doctor Who stories. The story about him in the 5th season is phenomenal. And then there's, of course, I can't remember what it's called. It's a Charlton Heston movie about Michelangelo. I love that movie. It's about the painting of the Sistine Chapel.
Oh, cool.
It's artists they operate a little bit different, and so getting into that psychology has always fascinated me.
Sentient Dildo says, so it's not my fault. It's the mystical dark force. Nice. Well, it's your fault if you give into it. It's your fault if you lose against the battle. I mean, I think he puts it so well because he wrote a few books on this. He wrote The War of Art, but also the one I really dig is called, where is it? Not Turning Pro, Do the Work. The Warrior Ethos, The Artist's Journey. That's it. The Artist's Journey. He wrote that as well, and essentially parallels the hero's journey, which is the very traditional storytelling structure, which I think works and should be honored. But he parallels that with the artist's journey, and that it's essentially like, for a good story, for a good hero, you need an equally good villain. And it's like, if you're trying to accomplish something mighty, you need a mighty force to overcome. I mean, that's like Luke does need to defeat Darth Vader, you know what I mean? Or the Emperor. Like, you need them to be that powerful for the hero's journey to be even kind of interesting. So it's like the parallel there is like, this resistance force needs to be something mighty for you to overcome. And it's like, it's a very valid, what's the word, metaphor or whatever. But I think that's completely 100% righteous. But it's like, if you quit, if you lose to that force, I mean, then, that's on you. But it is out there, and it is something you just have to face. Session Tildo says, and that mighty force is whiteness. Yes. So I know we don't have too much time, but I'm curious, how did you end up talking with Geeks and Gamers? Because I remember the first time you came on the show, you felt there was a vibe there. It's like you had like a clear point of view, you had like organized opinions, you had this whole kind of like, I was like, oh yeah, you felt like you belonged. So how did that come about?
Well, I started just as everybody else, as a fan, as a viewer, got in with them around Captain Marvel time frame with other Brie Larson videos. But I was watching one of their live streams, probably main event, about a year and a half ago. And Jeremy mentioned, hey, if you want to be on a writing team, if you want to write articles for our website, just scroll down to the bottom of the website and there's information on how to apply there. So that's how I started. I was a member of the writing team. Got in with the editor who works on the website, and I started writing articles, and that's what I did for about a year. And it's only in the last couple months that I've been actively involved in the YouTube side of things as well as the website side of things. Still on the writing team, but that's where I started, was just writing articles. And I basically sent like a bunch of excerpts from my book as my resume, and the editor's like, sick. Oh, you're a published author. All right, you got the job. That was pretty much the extent of my interview process, and it just kind of exploded from there. And I can't be happier. Geeks and Gamers has been an incredible opportunity for me, and it's some really great people that I've gotten really close with.
That's great. I mean, they're good dudes. I consider myself friends with Steph, but I've met a bunch of the guys on the crew. Like, I've met Ryan and I've met Jeremy, and like, you at the meetups and stuff. But they're just the nicest dudes. Like they're just super genuine, super like. I remember when I was in Dallas, I had to get going, and I just wanted Jared to like sign like the poster or whatever, and he was like, "Hey man," like he wanted to like like honor the fact that he knew me. You know what I mean? Have like that moment. I was like, "Yo, this dude's like just a real dude." You know, just like good people, man.
Absolutely.
Remind me, what's the name of your book one more time?
The series is called Odyssey of a Phoenix. The first one is Down in Flames.
Odyssey of the Phoenix?
Of a
Phoenix.
Yep, it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, pretty much anywhere online bookstores. It'll be sold there. A few on-site, like in bookshops, but that's very few and far between.
Okay, and what's your? I can't. I don't know. I can't spell. I thought I could spell Odyssey, but maybe not. Odyssey of a Phoenix, and what's your full name, my friend?
Jed Morgan.
Jed Morgan.
If you're looking for the Amazon link, I can drop that in the private chat right now.
I got it. I found it. Yeah, I'm gonna just put it in the chat there for everybody to take a look, so you guys can support an independent creator, a based-ass creator, a creator who works with geeks and gamers. You can support him. That's obviously a super long link, but you can find it, obviously, Odyssey of a Phoenix by Jed Morgan. Give it a look. Give it a goog.
It's on sale right now. So
it's on sale right now.
Pick it up.
Have you $4 on Kindle? I mean, come on. That's a steal, guys. That's a bargain at any price. Have you ever given any kind of thought to doing an audio version of it?
There is the consideration with my current publisher. They'll pay for it once we hit a certain level of purchases.
Oh,
so
cool.
It's on the table sometime near in the future, hopefully, if we can achieve that level, so I don't have to pay for it myself, because it's not cheap to make an audiobook, but it's 100% on the table, and they are already partnered with Audible, so it'll automatically go on Audible once we get to that point. But I would love to.
Would you do the voiceover yourself?
God, no.
No?
God, no. The thing with my story is it's first person, present tense, multi-perspective. So I'd have to do a lot of voices. And I'm not capable of doing more than my own. So I could do the main character's part, sure. I could do Arian's role, but then Otis and Charlie, I would be lost on how to even do that, because they're very unique characters. Like Otis is a 2,000-year-old shapeshifter who was born in Sparta, but spent most of his early life in Naples, Italy, during the the rise of Christianity, and that creates a whole different dynamic and Greek accent, which I'm not capable of. And then Charlie's Hispanic. Like I wouldn't be capable of it, but I'm sure there's a lot of talented voice actors out there who would be perfect for it. And I heard a few auditions, and I'm really excited to see if we can make this happen.
That's great, dude. Congratulations, man. I'm very impressed. I had a feeling you were younger, but I didn't realize you were 23. And it's like, that's an amazing accomplishment, you know, at any age, but let alone being 23. That's pretty rad.
Well, and Sentinel's talking about it in the chat. It is available on many other platforms as well. Amazon is just one of them. There's Barnes & Nobles. There's bookstore.com and several other places. Because I mean, I can't blame you. I can't blame you for that.
By the way, it's not Sentinel. It's Sentient Dildo is his name. He is an autonomous thinking, talking sex toy. That's who is in my chat, Sentient Dildo.
Very, very nice.
He fucking rules, though. So I just have a few minutes here, but I just want to ask you real quick, just what's the process of, like, getting something published? Because I have fucking no idea.
Well, I went an unorthodox route. Normally, there's the two different methods. There's self-publishing, which is easy. You just need to have a lot of capital. And then there's traditional publishing, which requires you to have a publisher who does most of the work for you. But getting a publisher's attention is insanely difficult. I tried for a long time. There's just a lot of competition. They don't accept unreferred text. You can't just, like, mail in your book and hope they like it.
Sounds a lot like Hollywood to me. Yeah,
exactly. It's the same deal with the auditions, and you need a casting director. You need an agent. Publisher's basically my agent. I need an agent, or otherwise I'm screwed. And I went an unorthodox route because my publisher, they're a hybrid of the two. You put up a percentage of the up front, and that buys your way into the door, and then they do all the work for you. So it was kind of a middle ground that made it really easy for me, and I can definitely recommend Riders Republic. That's my publisher.
Riders Republic. That's pretty sick, dude. Well, I want to say, man, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me. I thought this was a really cool conversation. I definitely wanted to talk to you more. You know, the cocktail lounge is so frantic and insane, so it's kind of hard to like nail down one conversation. But I really do appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. Had a blast.
Right on, brother. Well, everyone in the chat, you lovely folks, make sure you subscribe to Jed Hollywood Scholar on YouTube. Follow him on Twitter. And if you're a really good boy, buy the book. Buy Odyssey. What's it one more time? Just
Odyssey of a Phoenix, Down in Flames.
Down in Flames. I mean, I want to check it out for sure. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not the biggest reader in the world. I read it maybe
there's
like
pictures.
Oh my God, I love pictures for dummies like me.
And titty pictures too.
Titties? Love
titties. It's a rated R book.
Oh,
it's
sick.
Very, very rated R.
See that for all you naughty, naughty people in the chat? Take a look. Well, once again, Jed, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, anything else for the folks before we get out of here?
No, just please go subscribe to Geeks and Gamers Daily as well. We've rebranded the Geeks and Gamers live channel to Daily, and that's the new home for a lot of the videos that I'm working on for Geeks and Gamers. So
sick.
If you go subscribe over there, I would appreciate that as well. We're almost to 9,000, about 50 subscribers away from 9,000 over there.
Oh, yeah. Go be the 9,000th. I can say it. 9,000th subscriber. Almost got it out.
Almost.
Well, as for me, guys, you know me. Check out the MFer Cocktail Lounge every Friday night. This show, my Twitter, my Instagram, all that good shit. And thank you so much for hanging with us. And I really appreciate you. And we'll see you all on the next show. You have a lovely, lovely Wednesday. Bye now. Thank you for watching. Please press like, subscribe, and have a wonderful day.